Hi, Penny.
Hi.
Um, today I am interviewing Penny Moore, also known as Mary Penny Moore, and it is Saturday, February 8th. And I'm going to start off the interview by asking you where you are right now, Penny.
I am in a town in southern Texas near Houston, a suburb, I guess you'd say, of Houston called Willis. And it's a beautiful little area. It's right by Conroe, Texas, if that helps anybody.
Great. And because we're with the Orangevale History Museum, I am going to ask you about how you're connected to our community, but we're going to start off just by asking you where you were born.
I was born in Los Angeles, California, in June of 1948. And when I was 8 years old, I wanted a horse, and so I evidently annoyed my parents about it enough to where they decided they were going to move out of the area and take my sister, who was just born at this time, and myself to the country and get away from the cities, and they took us to the Sacramento area. We actually landed in Carmichael. We had a short time in Fair Oaks, and our final home was in Orangevale in 1961, I believe.
And how old were you when you arrived in Orangevale?
When Orangevale, I was older than when we got to California or Northern California. Orangevale, let's see, 12. I was 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
And who were your parents?
My father is Jack Brent Moore, and my mother is Mary Eloise Moore. And hmm, go ahead.
Oh, let's start with your mom. What year was she born?
She was born in 1921 in Vernal, Utah, and I'll go to my dad. He was born in 1923 in Los Angeles.
Okay. How did they meet?
I My mother was married to his best friend, and he went overseas and asked my mom's best or his best friend to watch over my mom and make sure she was okay while he was gone. And they ended up romantically involved, evidently, and that's she got a divorce from the first one and married the second one. She really was only with the first husband for 3 days before he was shipped out. So they didn't really have time to establish a marriage anyway, but yeah.
Wow, she was ahead of her time because, that wasn't as common back then, but nowadays you hear more and more stories about relationships starting like that. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm going to ask you first about your mom's side of the family. Who were her parents?
Her father was Snellen Vaughn Johnson, and her mother was Mary Ellen York. And they married and had 5 children. And my mother was the oldest, and they lost one at 18 months from measles and pneumonia in Utah, Salt Lake City. And then my grandfather divorced my grandmother when my mother was 16, and that she raised the children the rest of the way.
Where was your grandparents from?
Let's see. Grandma was born in Mona, Utah, and Grandpa was born in Vernal. Yeah, Vernal, Utah.
Okay, let's step back to your dad's side of the family because I want to try to figure out how uh, they ended up being in the same place at the same time and then ending up in
Yeah.
Los Angeles. Um, where who were your paternal grandparents?
Um, my dad's father, my grandfather, was Vern S. Moore, and that's Moore, Moore. And his mother was um, let's see, I got to remember, um, Amelia. Oh gosh, Cecil. There we go. Cecil, as spelled, excuse me, Cecil, and Amelia Lynn, Linn, and she was born in Nebraska, and Vern was born in Illinois, I believe. I'm pretty sure on that.
Okay, and so they ended up in so where did your parents meet?
At in Los Angeles. Um,
Okay, how
yeah.
did your dad get from that area to Los Angeles?
Well, my dad's father, traveled to Los Angeles for employment, from what I understand, and he was a crippled man, and it was hard for him to find employment, and he started working as a barber, and he got a job in Los Angeles working as a barber and stayed there. But he also passed away early. I don't think he got to live there more than, I think it was 6 years, and he passed away. I think he was young. I want to say 31, 32 years old. Um, Mostly his health, was an issue. Um, and the woman he married, she was born there in Nebraska, and I believe in Schuyler. And why did she go there? Oh, her first husband. Okay, this is kind of weird. Okay, she married the Vern that I'm talking about, my dad's dad. His uncle, so Vern's brother, was Cecil's first husband. She married him, had 3 girls. He died in the hills of Mona with black lung, working in the mines. Then 8 years later, she married his brother, who was Vern, and she had my dad. So the girls and him are kind of double related, um, by aunt and uncle. I forget how it goes, but anyway, yeah, that was interesting. But and then he passed away, so there my grandmother was alone, and she was in El Paso at the time, and when he passed away, the first husband. And so she stayed there for a while. She was working as a nurse, and she left and went to LA, and I don't have a reason. I don't know why she went to LA. Obviously, probably just to be able to make it easier to raise her daughters, because she had them all by herself now.
And how did your mom end up in LA?
Mom, who was born in Vernal, um, my grandmother left my grandfather. Well, they left each other, and they came to Los Angeles. Well, no, I'm sorry. They came to Los Angeles first, and then they split up. So my mom was there because of probably grandpa wanting to go to he was a musician, and he played clubs, and my grandmother was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. kind, kind of made it a odd combination. And so anyway, it didn't work out. So grandmother was stuck there, and and my mom just stayed because that's all she knew was mostly LA living, and she'd already graduated high school in Las Vegas. En route, evidently, my grandfather stopped when they were building the dam there in Vegas, or Boulder, I guess it's actually where the dam is. But um, my mother graduated from high school there at Las Vegas High. I know that. And my dad graduated from, okay, there goes one of those words. um, oh boy, I'll remember it. It's pretty, a lot of people have been born there or went to high school there. So what is the name of that school? Anyway, I'll come up with it later, I guess.
So we know how your parents ended up together. Did they know each other a long time or a short amount of time
No,
before they linked up? Okay.
yeah, no, I don't think they knew each other very long.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I would say probably inside of a year, probably.
Okay. So growing up, did you have a close relationship with either side of your grandparents? Did you get to see one often or even both sets?
Yes, I had a very close relationship with the two grandmothers and one grandfather, and that was the musician grandfather. The other one, like I said, died early, and I wasn't old enough to have a relationship with him before he passed. So he's the only one I didn't know, and actually only have one. Go ahead.
Mhm. Oh no, I was
I
just
only.
I was gonna ask you about your grandmas because you said you have a close relationship with them.
Mhm.
I was just gonna ask you about your fondest memories with them.
Well, my dad's mother was blind. She went blind at 35 of cataracts, which can be taken care of today, but back then they couldn't. And she was a cook for the Pace Military Academy, the head chef, actually. And she had to quit. And we have photos of my dad. They used him because he had polio as a young child, baby. And he was in leg braces, and the military academy decided to have him be a mascot for their yearbook, and which we have one of, and and that's where she worked until she couldn't see any longer. And so when I visited with her, they left me with her to be babysat, which sounds funny, but she could babysit me good. Um, she would have me, we'd push her chair up close to the TV, real close, like within, so her face was within a foot of the screen. And she loved Lawrence Welk, and she would sit there and she'd say, "What are they doing now?" And I'd say, "They're dancing." And she'd say, "What's her dress look like?" And I'd tell her, and what kind of shoes does she have on, and that kind of stuff. And because she could see light and dark moving in an area, a blur of light and dark, but she couldn't see, specifics. And so, and that was kind of my job. And every once in a while, she'd make me go get her a beer. I don't I don't know what that was about, but I remember doing that. Yeah, what have it? She'd say, "Go get me a beer, would you please?" Yeah, okay. So, and other than that, she just sat in her chair and listened to music. She liked music, and they had a small house in Hawthorne, was actually where I was born, and they the house was literally, people joked, but it was literally made out of a substance that was like cardboard. It was unreal. But I know they had ivy growing outside around the fireplace, the chimney on the house. And one day I realized I was old enough to really think about it. and there was a piece of ivy that went across the fireplace on the inside of the house. Well, it was coming from the outside. It literally went through that cardboard. So it tells you just how um, primitive, I guess, how they lived. The house was darling. It was a cute little house and everything, but it was barely a house. So I remember those kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank goodness there's not a lot of rain over there.
Yes. Yeah. Really. It didn't seem to ever have leaks or any of that stuff. They had a chicken coop out back. I remember that. But we moved from there when I was 8, so I wasn't. I retained things, but it was things through a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old kid's eyes. What impressed me. I would have to take it.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Um, so what did your parents do for work? Was it your father that just worked, or did both your parents work?
Well, my dad, both actually. My dad had several jobs through his life, and but mostly my mother, her father, had a rug and upholstery cleaning place in Redondo Beach, and he taught my dad how to do the business. And because before that, my dad was driving as a motorcycle. He would take money and important papers between banks. I don't know what he was called, but like some kind of a messenger person. But he wanted out of that, and so Grandpa offered him to help him, and he started my dad in business, and that's what my dad was doing when we left there and went to Northern California. Um, he started that business again in Carmichael when we moved there, and very successful business and stuff. And then we built a brand new, beautiful home in Fair Oaks on 5 acres, and it ended up they wouldn't finance it because my dad had only been in business for himself a short time in their county, in Sacramento County, and so even though he'd been in business many years in LA, it didn't count. And so anyway, we had to turn right around and sell the place. We moved back to the Carmichael house, and that's when my dad and mom started hunting for home in Orangevale. So we only stayed there a short time and then moved to Orangevale. So, and I was so glad. I loved it out there. Great area to ride my horse.
Where was your dad's business located?
In Orangevale, is that it was I was trying to remember the address. Do you know where okay, there was the old bar was on the corner of Hazel and Greenback called the Web. Have you researched that?
I haven't, and I'll admit I've only lived in the area 5 years, so I'm very much a
You're
student of learning
still
about.
new. Well, okay, if you went to the southwest corner where the Bank of America, I think, is still there, right? Uh, okay, and you went, uh, actually, that whole piece of property goes right to where my dad's building started. And he had a building that had three sections in it. And so we had one for our rug business. Woody's Western was in part of it. They were good friends of ours. And then for a while, he had a trophy shop in there. My dad didn't, another man did. And so there was three segments in the building, and I want to say it was oh, 8880 Greenback Lane. That number is familiar, but I could get old paperwork and find it, but I just don't have that in my head right now. But um, it was right across from what used to be the pharmacy across the street. We were right straight across. We were right before there was a blank lot to the west of us, and then there was a Mexican restaurant right there, and was the next building. So pretty much we took up just past the bank's parking lot. And I do have a picture. I was going through my photos on my phone, and somebody put a shot up, and it actually is our building and stuff. So I could just send that to you guys too. Um, I didn't have a picture of the front of the shop, and somebody else took it. So yeah, it's kind of nice. Yeah. So
Got to Orangeville, did your mom help out with the businesses or did she?
well, yeah, we all did because I mean, as soon as I had the bus drop me off there from school because I was the receptionist for the Chamber of Commerce. I answered the phones for them. And so, actually, we had that in front of our rug cleaning business. You'd walk in the door, and there'd be a small little office with a desk and a phone, and that was where I worked. And then you'd walk some more doors, and you'd walk into my dad's business. And yeah, so I did that all the way through high school. I answered the chamber's phone for them and answered any questions and stuff for the people that called. And so was did that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
you were going to school at that time too?
yeah, I was in high school when I was doing the chamber. All 4 years, I think I did, and then I got way too busy after I graduated.
What's your alma mater?
What is that? What is that? For sure.
Oh, it just means where did you go to school?
Oh, Bella Vista. Yeah, I definitely went to Bella Vista. I loved it. It was a good school.
Um, so you were a secretary
Actually, I
of
went to
the
Orangevale
chamber?
Elementary. Orangevale Elementary when I got there, and went to for seventh grade. I went there. I was in an eighth grade class. I don't know why they did that. They took half a dozen of us and put us in an eighth grade class. We must have been leftovers, or I don't know. But so I did seventh grade at um, Orangevale. I did eighth grade at Pershing. I'm saying Pershing. Yeah, Pershing on the other side. Yeah. And after I graduated Bella Vista, I went to Sierra College, taking criminal law.
Oh, okay. No, 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 it's okay. You can keep talking.
Okay. Yeah, I took criminal law and stopped and psychology, and I kind of quit for a while, and I went back again and took real estate and animal um, pasture management, a lot of animal classes, courses and stuff, because I had decided I was going to be an AHT, and and then that didn't come through because it cost too much money for me to get certified. At that time, I had no money to do any of that with, so I gave it up. I worked for veterinarians for 14 years, but I could never get the title of AHT. I did almost all the same work, but yeah.
Did
So
you work at a vet office local here?
yes, I actually worked for, well, one in Carmichael he had taken care of our animals when we were in Carmichael. And so it was easy to go ask for work there. So I went there first. He hired me, and then he had another veterinarian that wanted me to work for him in Citrus Heights. So I worked at the Citrus Heights uh, hospital. And then, but my very first contact with a vet was Dr. Harston and Dr. Bingham on Maine. Uh, I don't know if either one of them are still there or are with us still. But anyway, yeah, I worked I kind of, they bounced me around wherever I was needed, I went. So, but I love the work. It's great.
I want to actually go back because I don't want to skip over this, but when you moved to Orangevale, what house did you move into?
The first house my uncle built, it was at on Central Avenue, right across from the playground of the Orangevale School. Rose Acres, there's a dirt road there, Rose Acres Road and Central. It used to be a yellow house. I don't know if it still is. Out front, my uncle built that, and then he built one behind it, and then he skipped a house and built one behind that. And all my family lived there. We lived in the front house. My mom's sister and her husband lived in the second house, and the third house was my mom's sister and her husband, another sister. And so we kind of took up the neighborhood, and we had horses at the time, and we pastured our horses at other people's places in nearby.
Um,
That's when we
I
first moved.
talked. Oh, okay. I talked to Kay before your our interview, and she had mentioned that your dad was involved in the Twin Lakes riding club.
Yeah, he's one of the charter members. My parents were.
Um, and did he organize horse shows as well?
I'm sure he was involved. I don't know if he actually was the organizer. They had committees they formed, and I can remember them having meetings about it. Uh, and I know where they held their shows. Um, and I don't know that he specifically. I know he was involved because they only had a few members at the time, when it started, and so everybody had to be a part of what was going on. Um, but they did it mostly so that families could be together and ride together and do things with their children. That was the whole point of the parade too, was to get have an event for the children in the town to have something to look forward to and to do. And that was my dad's thinking. So
Speaking of the parade, would you like to talk about how your parents' involvement in terms of helping create the parade and helping organize everything every year related to the parade?
okay, let's see. I guess we could start with the fact that I know the parade took place maybe a couple years or 3 years, maybe, because I've read things. And evidently, they had a few parades before we got involved. And I don't know, I guess because my dad was a merchant and he probably went to the meetings, the chamber meetings and stuff too, and found out about the parade. So then he must have gotten himself involved by volunteering for something. And, I was busy in my teenage years and I wasn't paying attention to every detail of that. But um, next thing I know, and so I had to have been about 12, I guess, 12, maybe 13. He mentioned to us that they were having a parade and that it was going to go right down in front of our house. And everybody was going to line up at, it would have been Maine and I guess it turns to San Juanita. It's not, no, it turns, I forgot where it turned to Santa Juanita, but it would have been Central and Maine. On the southeast corner was a house, but all around it was an open field, big open field. And that's where I don't know if other people were involved, um, set up for everybody to line up for the parade so they could bring their entries and line up there. And then they went down in front of, what was her name? This school teacher. uh, anyway, Sarah, see names. I'm really bad with names. Um, they lined up in the corner there and started off the parade down Central Avenue. They went all the way to Hazel and they turned and went down Hazel. I don't know what the distance is, probably not even a quarter of a mile. to where the youth center was, and they all went up into the youth center property up behind the baseball field and, loaded their horses and undid everything, and left. And I think that was it. I can't remember, like, they could have had like a pancake breakfast, or they could have had stuff like that because they did later on, but I don't remember that. So I'm not going to include it. But I know that much about the parade. And that was our first involvement. And the first one we were involved in went down Central. And then, and I want to say that had to be 62 or 3. I'm guessing again, but I think that's it. And then, go ahead. Is it? Yeah. And then from there, it just grew. I can't remember. I tried last night to remember the year that we switched to Greenback Lane, and I can't remember. But it seems like it wasn't, we didn't do Central very long. And there was a couple other changes in there, two other ways, I think. And then it was decided Greenback needed, but Dad was the one that made the contacts. I think he volunteered himself, and he made the contacts with the sheriff's department and, all the things that had to connect, right, to have that road blocked off. And, I remember it. He had more of a nerve wracking time that year because he was learning too. And, and I think that's could have been the year we had Misterly as our trade uh, guest or whatever. I think the sheriff Misterly wrote in there. But anyway, um, so then it moved to Greenback. It got a little more serious then, and then it just grew and grew and grew. And I don't know a whole lot about the carnival part. Um, I was always involved with the parade part because they always had it all set up in the front room, and Mom was always, sending out letters, writing things, connecting to people. So I got familiar with that information. I don't know much about the carnival. Um, but and then Dad wanted to have a quick draw contest that went on. Um, I think my mom wanted the dance contests to happen. My dad was the master, the person that ran the queen contest all the years they had that. And I think all the years, I don't think they went much past when he quit. And of course, all those girls that were entering that were all my schoolmates, so that was neat. Um, I can't think of what else. Ask me more questions.
Oh no, that there was a lot because I was going to ask you about your mom, and you threw that in there because
Yeah.
she, like you said, she was in charge of the queen contest.
Well, I have a photo that was accidentally taken by me, and it is the lighting was funny in the front room, and it shows my father sitting, and I think he was like reading the newspaper, and he's in a haze, a dark haze, and my mother sitting at a card table in the middle of the front room working on the parade. And I thought, everybody says, oh, Jack's the one running the parade, Jack's in charge of all of it, and stuff. And I thought, oh, if they could see this picture, because here's my dad sitting back relaxing, and my mom's working on the parade. So and that's kind of how it was a lot. He worked on everything physically out there, but she was the one that did the paperwork and the things that had to be sent out and received. And line up in a parade is a really hard thing, and people don't realize. They just think, oh yeah, here, go ahead cars, go ahead horses, go ahead whatever. That's not how it goes. And they're given a number and put in a place specific to their entry. so that the little girls in their tutus aren't walking in horse manure, and uh, the horse event isn't right behind a band, or marching soldiers with slamming their guns on the ground. There was all that thought put into everything they did. Was
Yeah. And Kay mentioned, because you also mentioned how different years the routes were changed and it was done
Mhm.
on different streets. Did you ever hear about why sometimes those changes were made?
Think so. I don't have anything in my mind that no, other than the parade was too big at the point when they moved it to Greenback. And there was several things mentioned back then towards the end of when my parents were doing the parade. Um, it it was so big, and we were getting entries from the Rose Bowl parade. We were getting entries from all over. I mean, some fabulous entries, and that's why it was so good.
No, it's still such a beloved event that our whole town looks forward to every year. So we're
Yep.
very grateful for their contribution to that tradition.
Yeah. Are they
Yeah.
still having it? They still have a parade?
They still have a parade. It's called something different. The carnival part is called a palooza. You know, and so I and they center it more around patriotism and being near the Fourth of July. It's the Fourth of July parade now,
Oh,
so
is it?
pretty
Oh,
much.
not May
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. It was always
Yeah.
May, mid-May.
Oh. Well, that's good to know because I don't think a lot of us who are younger or were in the area would know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Back
was
then.
always held.
Yeah.
I want to say May 19th. It seemed to fall real close to there all the time. I usually went around and helped put up posters, and actually there's a newspaper in the Orangeville News. There's a photo of me holding up a big poster that I was putting on a door in Folsom. I actually went over to Folsom and put up ads on the parade and the event and stuff to spread it around in case they didn't go through Orangevale, because they could go down Madison and avoid us altogether. So,
Actually, I think I'm mistaken. It's not necessarily the Fourth of July, but it's like a patriotism summer parade, and um,
we always
it's closer actually to fourth. It's the Father's Day weekend usually
oh, that's
because that's
June.
when the Palooza is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So
they
I'm mistaken. I misremembered that. Yeah.
yeah, Father's Day is June what 19th or something. And it used to be May 19th. So that's just a month. But yeah. Um it was always our first sunburn, because we were all out there in the sun all day cooking ourselves for the first time, and um that's how we remember it. But it was a wonderful event. I mean, uh, so much for the kids, so much for, well, actually, as it ended up, it started, like I said, for children, and it ended that way for us. But we got such family support. The adults really got into the parades, and the people. Now, when my mom passed away, there were boxes and boxes of 8x10 glossies that were taken of these every entry by the photographer, and I can't remember his name right now, but it should be on those pictures. I took two large boxes into the Chamber of Commerce and gave them to him a few years, well, more than a few years back now, but probably five, let's see, maybe 8 years back. And then when I was packing to come down here, I also found another box, and I took that box and went through it, and I knew a lot of those people. I grew up with them, and so I took and sent them. I went and got the big envelopes and stuff and some postage, and all sent them their pictures, because if their pictures were in those boxes, it's because they either didn't know they could get their pictures or they couldn't afford their pictures. So I thought, well, that's silly. They need, these people are my age now. They need those pictures. So I sent them.
And these were the boxes that you brought to the Chamber of Commerce that you are
Yes.
still searching for?
No,
Yes.
I'm not.
Okay. Or I mean, that you were concerned about because
Yeah, I hope everybody got them. I mean, they said they were going to give them right straight to somebody. Of course, I didn't know the people, but um, and I left them there. So because I knew eventually somebody had already told me at that point that they were contemplating a history museum, and that's why it occurred to me I need to take those pictures. I don't need them, and I need them to go. Um, I did keep uh, three of the pictures because my horseback riding companion and friend was Lynn Anderson, the singer, and I kept hers.
that's that's really interesting. And when you mention the boxes, you know, there have been boxes of pictures that have been turned into us. I wonder if those are the same pictures and we're having to go through them and we're having a hard time, you know, knowing what to include or knowing because we don't know who
Who
a
it
lot of the
is.
people are.
That's
So
right.
yeah, so I'm gonna forward that information and I'm gonna let Kay know, you know, maybe if there's a really exceptional picture that we know we want to include in something, we should be sure to contact you because maybe you'll know who they are.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. I did find a couple that I didn't. I mean, I obviously the people. Some people are still in touch with people from that topless bar that was there, the Pink Pussycat. There's pictures in there of those ladies on a convertible car in the parade with clothes. Um, and there's like Sheets Welding. I don't even know if they're still there. Uh, I off the top of my head, there's pictures that people should know. Those people have been there all these years. That family has been there and supported the town. So, but I was going to tell you something. Oh, with Lynn Anderson, she's now passed, but um, she was my high school friend, and so that's why I kept that picture. But everything else went to either I sent it to the person that I knew it belonged to, and the family, I mean, and I got so many nice letters back about that. It was really neat that I did that. A neat experience for me is what I'm saying. Um, and then, but there should be three of them, and each one of them has well over 100 photos in it. They're all 8 by 10 glossies. They're big, so, and there's some small pictures. I don't know if they were just the photographers. I don't know. The photographer just gave them to my mother after he sold what he was going to sell, and he gave her all the rest. And then that's what I got. So, yeah, it would be nice. I knew that you could use some of those photos, so that's why I brought them. All right.
No, yeah, because it's something that still occurs to this day. You know,
Yep.
we're definitely going through those boxes. You know, but like I said, we're having hard time identifying people, and then you know we're not sure what to include and what not to include based on
Right.
that. But I want to go back to so you said you lived on Central when you first moved
First
here,
move.
and that your
Yes.
whole family lived, huh?
Yes.
Yes, and And but that was your first house in Orangeville. How did you get from that house to the Warhoftig house?
Well, there was like, I figured it up, and I think there was 11 homes in between. That sounds horrible, but yeah, we moved a lot. Mostly because we had horses and, things necessitated it. But um, we did that. We moved and moved and moved and tried to kind of upgrade each time. And Warhoftigs, I'm trying to remember. We sold a place at Mountain and Golden Gate, and my parents wanted a lease option for that, for Warhoftigs, because it had a little bit of acreage with it, and we still had some horses, just a couple though, and it had a huge stock barn for animals and all that, and it was full. The wall in it was covered with harness, all the work harness for the work horses, and then they had the other barn because they were fruit growers, and they had the well, I don't know what you call that barn. A loading shed, I think is what it was, because it had a floor that was 4 feet off the ground, and like a vehicle would pull up to it, and then they could load it, walk right into the truck. And so it had that cut out in the flooring, and in that on that flooring of that barn, it had a doctor's buggy, horse-drawn buggy, a beautiful, beautiful piece, in immaculate condition, was sitting in that barn, and crates and things like that from when the past, when they had moved fruit, evidently probably fruit crates and stuff. But we were excited to just have access to the little barn, and which eventually fell down, and we just hauled off the wood, and I don't know what happened to that all that harness. We were in the leather business, so Dad must have done something with it, but I don't know what. Maybe I didn't live there then. But anyway, that's the house I lived in when I graduated from Bella Vista, and the house was so amazing, so interesting, and we actually found, my mom was restoring, paper and painting and all that stuff inside, and under the stairwell, um, how they'll have, like, it's kind of like a little closet under there. And she was in there, and she was going to put wallboard and finish it because it was rough. It was just 2x4s. And she found a pair of gloves. And the gloves were uh, Wild Bill Hickok's gloves. He signed them. And they were a huge, big white pair of gloves with big 12-inch fringe that hung off of them, and had signatures on them and everything. So my mom was thrilled. And because we knew they had to be, even if they weren't his own personal ones, he signed them and gave them to somebody in that house. Excuse me. And then so she decided that they were important enough to where she was going to give them to, which at the time, I might be mistaken about this. Oops, sorry, I just touched something. um
It's okay. You're fine. You're fine.
okay, okay. um She, I think it was called the Women's Guild. Was there ever, do you know about that? Is there a women's guild that what used to be, could be something else now, but
I know there's the women's club. That's the only thing that I know of.
just the women's club. Yeah. Well, she gave it to whoever was supposed to be able to take the history of the town. And I think that's what it was called when my mom contacted them. And they were tickled to death to get them. But somebody I talked to in the last little bit said they can't find them. They don't, nobody claims that they have them. So we don't know where they went. But it's been a lot of years since then, because that was, well, I graduated in '66. So it had to be right in there. And and then one day we decided to. There was an attic section in the top floor in the bathroom. Yeah, it was in the bathroom. And mom and I decided to peek up there and see what was up there, figuring it was going to be bats and stuff like that. And we opened that opening, and first thing we saw was a beautiful camelback trunk. And so we went up in there, pulled that trunk out, brought it down through that hole, and it was a big one. It was a what they call the stagecoach one. It was the big trunk, and brought it down and opened it up, and it had treasures in it. It had all the wallpaper samples that they had put in the house were there, and then ledgers. And I'm trying to find that now. As a matter of fact, a friend's coming after our interview to go through some of my boxes so we can maybe find these papers. Um, there was a ledger that was a journal, and the gentleman, I can figure it was a man, wrote every dime. I mean, literally every dime he ever spent in his entire life was written in there, and what he paid for and who he paid and every detail. It's unreal, down to a nickel. I mean, everything. And the other one was a ledger folded over all the uh, what do you call them? Sales slip. Like he bought the Lyric Theater in downtown Sacramento, and he bought a piano from somebody, and he bought all these things and property and uh, any business deal he did. It was all in there. All these leases and receipts and yeah, a bunch of legal papers. In other words, probably no good now, but they were then. And they're all dated, and they're all the amounts are there. It was just unreal, but it was fascinating. I read that one that was his journal, and it was unreal. And through the whole thing, not one mention of this person's name. That's why I'm assuming it was a man. Not one mention of the name, not in the beginning, not in the end, not in the middle. And I guess you wouldn't need to put your name because you're writing it, and stuff. But um, I got to figure it was Mr. Warhoftig, and because he was quite old, I guess, when he passed away, and he did pass away there in the house. And but we contacted the owners, and we said, we just leased your place, and there's things here that we want to know if you want, to keep and stuff, because they were stuff out in that barns and all kinds of things. And they said, the only thing we want is the chandelier, which was gorgeous, that hung over the dining room table. There was two oil lamps in the dining room also on the wall, and they wanted those. And they're real ornate, real pretty. They wanted the wagon, the doctor's wagon out in the barn, and I believe that's it. Yes, the chandeliers, the oil lamps, and the wagon. They said anything else is ours in the home. Just it's yours. They all lived in the Bay Area and didn't want to be bothered. Um, and so that's how I ended up with the Bible stand that's here in my home, and the little cabinet that my dad. It's kind of a joke because staples were used as doorknobs, and I left them that way because I think it's priceless. But it's just a little cabinet with all these little drawers, and they don't work well on everything, but it's really a neat little thing. And I kept the camelback trunk, which I have since. When I moved here, I couldn't ship it, so I sold it to a friend of mine, uh, and she's got it in her home in Missouri. So, but those three things we left with, both two beds that were in the on the property we kept, but since don't have any longer. And There was a wood burning stove in the kitchen. It's gone. It was small. And yeah, just odds and ends, little odds and ends that they didn't want to bother with. And they came and got the wagon and the stuff, and that was it. So we lived there. When did my parents buy that house? Let's see, 66. I'm going to say 3 years, maybe four. But and then they bought a home down the street on the next corner, because that's Chestnut. Walnut, they bought a house on the southwest corner there, and it actually faces Central. It's 9292, and it was a big, nice. Oh, it was a little teeny home. My parents added on and put a two big bedrooms downstairs and a big upstairs. And after we did all that, they lived there till they both passed. Well, my mom came up to live with us till for a little while, and then they just rebuilt that whole house. It's all completely different now. So I don't know why they did that, but anyway, it was a big pink and white two-story. Everybody in town knew the pink and white two-story because my mom's letters all done in pink. It was a big, nice. So,
We've been recording for it looks like 57 minutes, and for us to continue this conversation. But I just wanted to let you know in case it was getting too much for you. If you want to share any last memories or helpful information that you think would be interesting to us historical society folk, I welcome you to continue this conversation. But if you are ready to end it, you just let me know.
well, well, I don't, I mean, if I had time to think about it, I probably would think of things of, history that people might be interested in. I don't, I can only think of things off the top of my head that happened around my life and my world, but I, we were on the news and um, yeah, we were on TV when I was riding with a young man on our horses, and we were going over to the river, and we were riding where they were doing new construction when they were doing Madison Avenue through there, and where all those apartments and stuff like that are now. And they that used to be called I people called it what, Madison Hills or something like that. And they used to ride the dirt bikes over there. But before that happened, when they first started doing construction, they built moved a bunch of dirt, and there was a natural water creek that went through there. And I rode through the creek and it was fine, but the guy I was riding with rode through and his horse went down, all just sunk. And she was in quicksand. And so all that was out of the water was her head. Now my horse went by and just barely got his belly wet. I mean, it wasn't deep where I walked across, but he hit a spot, I guess. And from all the sand moving and everything, all the construction, it had rained and all that sand came down and made a big thing of quicksand. So anyway, we were out there in the middle of nowhere. It was a weekend, so there was no workers or anybody there. Excuse me. So he got on my horse and took off, and I held his horse's head out of the water. And pretty soon, the fire trucks and the ambulances and the news people, and all that started happening all around us. And they did get the horse out, and everything was fine. And she was pregnant, and she did have that baby. So that was a big deal that, kind of happened in Orangevale, but more big for us. We were scared. But we were on the news that night on TV. We all sat there at the dinner table and watched it. There was an escape from Folsom Prison. He got out of the livestock area somehow. Our windows. He was on his hands and knees. We could hear the sirens and stuff going at our home when because at the time we lived on Rose, and they came and that they seemed to center their search across the street. And he got loose, and I was babysitting that night. My parents went out dancing, and event that happened in Orange. I'm babysitting my sister, and that man, we had bay windows that went about a couple of feet back then. And I mean, those kind of things come to my mind. I peeked in the window, and all the lights and the sirens started coming. We could see them down through the pasture that I haven't covered on my horse. And that they seemed to center their search across the street at my girlfriend's house, and they caught him in her chicken coop. So that was another event that happened in Orangevale. Was at a time mom got notice in a letter. I might even have history, but it was a big deal back then. And I mean, those kind of things come to my mind. I've ridden every inch of that whole town. There is famous people or
Mm-hmm.
inch that I haven't covered on my horse. That I know. So I could tell you how the land goes and where the fences were and all that. But um,
And like I said, if you want to do a part two, all you have to do is just message me.